Happy holidays, everybody, and Tony here with a tribute to A Christmas Surprise for Mrs. Stillman from Life with Louie, which aired on Fox Kids on November 18, 1994. This was directed and written by Matthew O'Callaghan, in which the series was also based on Louis Anderson's life growing up in Wisconsin, and the storyboard was done by Martin Fuller and Dan Root. I was never too much of a huge follower of Louis Anderson's career as a comedian, although I did catch him in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where he had a cameo part. Nor did I hear about the show that was based on his life growing up in Wisconsin, Life with Louie. I mainly heard about it in passing, and from what I've researched about the show, I have read that there were some veteran voice actors who also played various parts, such as Edie McClurg, Justin Shenkarow, and Debbie Derryberry. I mainly knew them in other shows, but I was pleasantly surprised to know that they also had a go at this show. I also went into Life with Louie not expecting anything at all. I was half expecting it to be quite pandering and obnoxious, almost like certain shows that star a celebrity in animated form. I almost half expected it to be campy too. However, as I tuned in to the Christmas episode, which also served as the pilot for Life with Louie, I was not disappointed at all. In fact, I thoroughly enjoyed it from beginning to end, and from what I have noticed about A Christmas Surprise for Mrs. Stillman, it does seem to take some inspiration from Jean Shepherd's A Christmas Story. What with the adult Louis Anderson narrating his life growing up as a kid in Wisconsin and narrating what it was like to spend Christmas in his home state. The special starts off with a live action segment of Louis Anderson himself telling us, the viewers, what it was like growing up as a kid in Wisconsin celebrating Christmas alongside his family. We then cut to the main story where Louis, Aura, and Tommy are really excited for the Christmas season after Thanksgiving gave way to that latter season, while Louis and Tommy's father, Andy, is grumbling and bitching about the holiday season and states that the holidays are an excuse for people to save electricity. And he even makes a reference to how he once fought in the war with Europe, because Andy is also a war veteran who is also an electrician. And even as he switches to another radio station, he still hears a lot of this Christmas joy, especially in his favorite fishing radio program. Winter has finally come to Wisconsin, complete with a huge blanket of snow, which means that for Louis and Tommy, school's out and they can finally play in the snow. However, Andy is still grumbling and moaning about how he has to shovel all that huge pile of snow. He even complains when a drip of his coffee given to him by Louis, at least he took a sip to warm him up. The boys then meet up with their next door neighbor, Mrs. Stillman, who is looking for her newspaper. Now, Mrs. Stillman is very loved by all the kids and neighbors because of how sweet and kind she is. And even Louis was mischievous yet sweet enough to find her newspaper, which was buried under a layer of snow. And since there is snow, this means that Louis, Tommy, and their friends, including Michael and Jeannie, engage in a snowball fight. It seems to go swimmingly well until Michael ends up hitting Louis on the ear with a snowball. Now, having a snowball being hit in Louis's ear means that it's so excruciating that he ends up yelling, screaming, and limping back into the house and lets out one huge darn. After that mishap and in the evening, the Anderson family planned to acquire a Christmas tree. Out of all the choices, they end up with one that costs $35, and for $35, it seems quite small. In fact, how the tree is mounted is that it is mounted on a stand, but it limps as Andy grumbles and ends up just giving up and decides to watch television. What else is on television but the 1946 classic Miracle on 34th Street, which Louis and Tommy enjoy while munching on donuts prepared by their mother, Aura. Aura then notices that Mrs. Stillman is usually so alone during the holidays because her now grown-up kids are in Florida and her husband passed away. So in order to bring in some holiday cheer to Mrs. Stillman, she decides that it would be great if they decorated her house with Christmas lights. And speaking of Christmas lights, let's just say that Andy is no master decorator, as he ended up doing a half-assed job decorating the house with Christmas lights. So it seems like it's up to Andy and Louie to set up the Christmas lights while leaving Tommy to be babysat by Laura. In the shack, they were fortunate enough to find some Christmas lights, and of course, they work, much to Andy's displeasure. Andy begrudgingly complies that he will end up decorating Mrs. Stillman's house with Christmas lights. And one observation that Louis notices is that Mrs. Stillman does not have a Christmas tree. It seems so bereft of any Christmas decorations, although the house is well lit. Nevertheless, Andy states that it's because Mrs. Stillman is richer and cannot afford to waste any electricity. Louis has a hard time untangling the Christmas lights because of his stubby fingers. That is until they are halted by the police, who think that Andy and Louie are trespassing. Especially Andy. Andy does his very best to try to clarify that he was just decorating Mrs. Stillman's house with the Christmas lights, as he also shows them proof of how he half-assedly decorated his house with Christmas lights. Louis is at first totally cool with the police interrogating his dad. That is until they try to arrest him, does Louis emerge from the shadows and state that it's all the truth, that his dad was really trying to surprise Mrs. Stillman by decorating her house with Christmas lights. And here's one cute moment. After Louis puts his hands up, the police say that he should put his hands down because he's not in any trouble, and even as Louis tries to put his hands down, his arms are still widespread. Although Andy and Louis go back to work, they are then interrupted by Michael, Jeannie, and their friends about to sing some Christmas carols. Andy slips and is about to fall from the roof until the kids pelt him with snowballs. Louis then defends his dad by stating that he is just trying to decorate Mrs. Stillman's house with Christmas lights. Michael, Jeannie, and their friends now understand what they were trying to do and help out Louis and Andy with everything they've got. There's even this banter between Michael and Andy where Michael hears a conked out engine saying that Andy's car is so old and rusty and lets out a lot of noise. And just as Andy processed that insult and is about to throw one of the elf lights onto Michael, Louis notices that there is a socket that needs to be plugged in order for all the lights to glow. Andy manages to do it, and wouldn't you know it, Mrs. Stillman's house is glowing with Christmas lights galore. Mrs. Stillman appreciates this gesture and invites the kids for hot chocolate and more Christmas carols as she plays on the piano with them singing Silent Night. Louis then peers out the window to see his dad fixing what needs to be fixed as he gives a soft smile at him without him even noticing. Now, this is one scene that I really liked because although there is a lot of friction going on between Andy and Louis as father and son, what with Andy thinking that Louis tends to be such a nuisance and Louis thinking that his dad can be kind of inept at times, at least they do one thing, and that is they care for each other deeply. No matter what flaws they have, no matter what ills they have against each other. And of course, they at least acknowledge that there is nobody on this earth they would rather be than with each other as father and son. Come Christmas morning, and the boys are very excited to open their presents. Even Louis gives one to his dad as Andy exclaims that he's been looking for these wrenches. Nevertheless, Andy is still very happy for Louis in terms of the gesture that he has given him. We even end with an epilogue as Louis Anderson himself greets us, the viewers, a very Merry Christmas. This pilot/Christmas episode was surprising in more ways than one. Yes, it is the 90s equivalent to Jean Shepherd's A Christmas Story, what with Andy being the crusty yet well meaning dad, Aura being this loving and sweet mother, Louis being the clever main protagonist who also remarks what is going on, especially when his adult voice is heard, and funnily enough, that adult voice is also used when he's a kid, and of course, the younger brother, who in this case is quite sweet and well meaning, and both Louis and Tommy do have moments of brotherly bonding despite some fights that occur between them. And I also thoroughly enjoy this particular Christmas episode because if you know me, I'm also a sucker for slice of life Christmas specials that don't always deal with Santa Claus, but rather deal with the importance of family, togetherness, and just being there for one another. And that's what A Christmas Surprise for Mrs. Stillman did. And here's also something rather interesting about how this episode ended, especially when it came to Mrs. Stillman. It's also revealed that the reason why she didn't have Christmas ornaments or Christmas lights in her home is because she's Jewish. I didn't really expect that, but at least this episode managed to pull it off rather well, especially by giving off some hints as to why her house is barren of any Christmas decorations. And this episode being played off as a 90s equivalent to A Christmas Story was also affectionately done. And this is also helped by the fine voice acting talents of Louis Anderson himself, voicing both Louis and Andy, Edie McClurg, Miko Hughes, Justin Shenkarow, Debbie Derryberry, Troy Evans, Wallace Langham, and of course, Liz Sheridan as Mrs. Stillman, who imbued this character with a lot of sweetness and warmth. When all is said and done, I really cannot recommend A Christmas Surprise for Mrs. Stillman enough. It does not talk down to its viewers, it's surprisingly warm and genuine, and I'm sure that you will have a wonderfully good time. And for those of you who caught A Christmas Surprise for Mrs. Stillman, what'd you think of it? Was there a moment that you found was completely wonderful in your eyes that left you with a lot of awe and warmth in your hearts? Was there a moment that you thought was really hilarious? Was there a moment that made you smile with such glee? Or did you feel like this Christmas special was not your cup of tea? And did you also feel like it was quite boring? Comment below and let me know. Well, this marks my final tribute video for the Fox Kids Christmas episodes of 1995. I also want to give a huge shout out to Rinse Repeat for uploading such nostalgic content, especially when it comes to the shows I've never even heard of before, had vague memories of, or have probably enjoyed them when I was a child, but didn't really go back to them until now as an adult. So, here's hoping that you have a very Merry Christmas. I also hope that your 2022 will be just as prosperous. And here's more love and hope and success to you and your family and everything you do. And please do stay tuned much later where I finally take a look at the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's first Christmas episode, Deck the Halls. So until then, happy holidays, everybody!